You know, they love what your strength can build for them, but they absolutely hate the weight of it when it turns on them. Has anyone ever noticed that? You can be the pillar, you can be the one who survives the trauma, beats the odds, raises the children, and pulls massive life changing results out of thin air through sheer brilliance. When you are quietly funding the momentum or saving the day in the background, you're kind of a miracle worker, right? But the second you demand basic, non negotiable professional respect, the second you draw a hard boundary, look at the cold data, and refuse to swallow a lie, suddenly the script flips. Suddenly you're too emotional, you're too volatile, you're too serious. And then comes the ultimate bottom shelf patriarchal line: you just need to smile more. Think about the absolute psychological audacity of that request. It is a demand to sanitize your lived experience for someone else's convenience. They look at a woman who has conquered actual giants, a woman who is actively speaking out against real world horrors and fighting for the survival of her people, and then they ask for a customer service grin because your gravity makes them feel their own lack of it. It's a ghost story they tell you to make you second guess your value. They'll hide behind an unknown source or a nameless critique, whispering that your intensity is a flaw, hoping you'll step back, sit down, and make yourself digestible. They want you to share your story for their consumption, but only if you dress up your scars in a way that doesn't disrupt their cozy illusions. But here is the reality check they never see coming. When a weak person tells a resilient, self sustained woman that she is too much, what they are actually admitting is that they are too small. Your competence terrifies them. Your hyper awareness, the fact that you see every erased text, every shifted timeline, and every critical double standard makes it impossible for them to play their games in peace. So, they try to negotiate away your boundaries under the guise of caring about you, your success, your life, etc. It really leaves a foul taste in the mouth, and it should. It's an exploitation of your labor and a violation of dignity. But you don't owe anyone your authenticity as a performance, and you sure as hell don't owe them a smile. If a circle expects you to shrink your light just to keep their fragile egos comfortable, let them sit in the dark. Be independent. Be an ungovernable force. Because you didn't claw your way through literal hell to take orders from the people currently idling in the sandbox. So hold the line and let them call it too much. To the right people, to your own empire, it's exactly enough. And I want to reiterate here that I discuss a lot of serious topics, and it got brought up about intensity and, you know, this is interesting because as a writer, I take into consideration what readers say. Well, it so happens that my daughter is a huge bibliophile, and she has a little pet peeve, and that pet peeve is that she does not like stories with what she considers to be spineless heroines. And she likes strong, bold, and outspoken heroines. She likes women that are empowered to stand up for themselves. And, that is something that a lot of publishers for a long time really put their nose down on, because women that are bold, assertive, and take up space are intimidating to the patriarchal structure. And I want to bring this back even further because when we talk about witch trials, the Spanish Inquisition, burning witches at the stake, these were women. These were intelligent women, bold, articulate, outspoken women. Women who were perceived to be too much. Women who weren't delicate and demure. Women who weren't showing a softer side of themselves. Women who weren't falling in line with the nurturing matriarchal role that the patriarchy wanted matriarchy to look like, which was with them overlording, of course, and women caring for children and women caring for domestics in the household and all that trad wife stuff. And when you've done that and you've tried it a couple of times and you see how men are and the amount of emotional labor, the narcissism, the toxicity. That's not to say that all men are that way. I know there's going to be the, oh no, all men aren't that way crowd. Of course, there always is. You know what we say about that. But again, this comes down to telling an independent, confident, and empowered woman that she's too emotional, she needs to smile more, is one of the rudest, most despicable things a man can say. Especially when you look at the sincerity of the person discussing certain topics that fall in spheres where, it is unfortunately the truth that when you work in advocacy, activism, peer support, anything like that, you're going to see trauma, tragedy, and horrific circumstances. It's not fun. It's not fun. We're talking about intervention for people who are starving, dying, going through X offenses, survivorship of those things, highly traumatic scenarios. I mean, even just looking at New Jersey, they have been having a hunger strike for nearly 2 weeks. And when protesters went to go stand up for that, for people who were being fed rotten food that had maggots crawling through it, they were stampeding horses, stampeding, making some absurd thing that doesn't make any sense in America or on an American soil called free speech zones, um, initiating curfews. It was just insane. And these are the kinds of topics that I'm often discussing, being that I've been a boots on the ground advocate and activist, being that I discuss topics and I've done independent journalism and investigative journalism, and that I've written for a variety of different types of media. Too much. Yes, indeed. What does that actually mean, though? Because if a woman is intelligent and articulate and able to fiercely advocate for important causes such as ensuring that people have healthy food while they're in detainment when they should not even be detained, are serious topics that are going to cause emotional volatility at times. People are dying. I do not understand how tone deaf someone could be to not understand that. On the same token, however, I do recognize the necessity for balance, for getting out in nature, for doing things to make life enjoyable. However, the thing about that is we need to look at the economy. People keep talking about go to more events, protest more, do this more, do that more. All of those things cost money. And as much as people like to tout the myth of the paid protester, that's really truly not the case. Um, People who are paid, it's because they get sponsorships or subscriptions from people who listen to their Substacks or follow their TikToks or whatever, and they earn revenue off of the engagement, of course. In some cases, they might have merchandise and things like that, other design aspects that they use to try to supplement their income. But there aren't any checks coming from some foreign source for them to go out there. And so, truthfully, when you don't have enough money and you have to pay for your bills, especially if you're a parent, and you have to do all these other things because those are your primary responsibilities, um, getting out and having fun is not always so easy. So you have to find ways to make life enjoyable. But for those who are marginalized and oppressed and who have always been, even when they're trying to break free from it, privilege and opportunity for access to certain experiences that might bring a smile is not necessarily something everyone gets to do. Or when you get to do it, it's not necessarily something they get to do often. People take it really, for granted how doing certain things that would be fun is not accessible to everyone who's not part of the bourgeois. And that's kind of the state that we're in. I mean, I seen an article earlier today talking about how we're going, or no, it was a YouTube video, how we're going into the second depression and people can already feel it. They're talking about us having food shortages. They're talking about if people can't afford to get their assets together now in the next 2 to 3 years, that they probably never will. How AI is going to take over everyone's jobs and all these other things that are all honestly quite depressing. And they are going to be things that cause emotional volatility. That is what happens in late stage capitalism. And putting on a mask and pretending that everything's okay and smiling and trying to make it seem like life is great when it really isn't is not so easy for those who choose to be authentic. And so I recognize that there are times my personality is quite confrontational, to be honest, that I say things that stir the pot, that I definitely would have been burnt at the stake if it were the 1700s, 1600s. And yet, the necessity to keep talking about things is there. Finding a reason to smile and keep hope is something that we all have a challenge with. And I got told that I needed to talk more about my personal journey and the things that I've seen and experienced. I have talked about those things many times. I've made calls to action, hoping that people would care and that it might be able to make an impact in my life that would be gainful in a way that I could actually advance to do more to help people with mutual aid. But when you're limited and you're born marginalized and you fought being homeless your entire life, to be honest, privilege and experience that comes with certain amounts of money and opportunity are not so easily granted. But authenticity also means showing that there is a level of realism to those emotions that are observed, that they are authentic in the moment. But being able to control oneself and keep things to a certain calm with self discipline is crucial. And being a person that's gone to therapy for quite a while, working on 10 years, I've grown quite a lot. And my therapist told me that today, which made me very happy. Um, I've become a lot more bold, confident, capable. I know my value and my worth, and it's a non negotiable for me. So when someone tells you you need to smile more, or your emotions are too much, and you work in spheres where genuine authenticity is tested by your reaction and your responses, it's very important that you really tune in with your inner self and know who you are, because the external is going to say whatever it's got to say, and people are always going to have an opinion about the way you choose to present yourself. At the end of the day, it's what you think about yourself, and you'll know if you're being authentic or if you're parading around. And the toxicity around you and the circle that you keep and the things that you're willing to tolerate are all going to reflect back on that. And you will become like the company that you keep. So if you surround yourself with people who present one thing and then later say another, you now know that there is a little bit of a discrepancy. And that discrepancy is something to pay attention to. Because who are they really? Are they the person that they present to be? Nice, kind, unwilling to give criticism that might cause harm, but yet at the same time saying things that are known to do the same? You have to really pay attention to what people do, especially when it comes through on activism. And you really have to be in touch with who you are, what you want, and what your hopes are when you're looking at these things, because it is true not to be doom and gloom all the time. You do have to find reasons to find hope and joy. But sometimes it's not as easy as it seems. And for the people that understand that they don't have the money to get out and do necessarily everything that they'd like to do, going out and having fun isn't always something they can afford, even the gas money to get out to just go down to, let alone the price of things once they get to the fair, even if it is a free street fair that you only have to worry about parking somewhere on the corner and walking through. Those vendors, the food trucks, all of those things cost money. And so it might be cool to walk through, check everything out. And people will find contentment in that where they can, but other people, it's going to make them feel a little sad too. Because who really likes to go to the festival and see all the things you can't have? That's not very fun. And so the turnout for fairs and festivals will probably be less. And then you look at the cost of concerts for summer shows and fairs. They're so astronomical compared to what they used to be. They're becoming so unaffordable that only high class people who have levels of money most of us will never be able to even conceive will be able to afford to do them. Like, the cost to go to a concert is comparable to going to something like Burning Man in some cases. And that's just insanity. So as we come through Pride Month and we want to find reasons to be celebratory and joyous, yeah, that's fun. But remember, Pride started because of a riot. And that was heartbreaking. And it was sad. And it was terrible and violent. And people had to pick up bricks to defend themselves simply for wanting to exist in a third space to enjoy being who they genuinely were. And now we have the celebrations, but people are still dying for being who they genuinely are. People's rights are still being denied. People's accessibility to those third space experiences are still being denied. And so really let that sit with yourself as you think about that. It's really easy to get on social media and ask for donation and help and people to get out in the street, but a lot of people can't afford it anymore. And then when people say, oh, well, get out and enjoy life, again, a lot of people can't afford it anymore. That's why it was a depression the first time. Then we went into a recession, and now they're saying depression 2.0 because people couldn't afford to do anything. And, I seen someone ask the other day, a commenter who said something, it was on another video I seen, but it basically was like, well, what's going to happen when none of us can afford the gas to get to work? Well, that's pretty easy, actually, if you think about it and you look at the picture of what they've been doing, making homelessness illegal and everything. So what happens? Let's make this easy. Let's do just like a couple of steps. Step 1, they make everything super inaffordable. Gas is outrageous. You can't pay for your gas. Step 2, you lose your job. Step 3, you can't afford to pay your bills. You get evicted. Step 4, you're homeless. By the way, homelessness is illegal in your locality. Here come the police. You've been arrested. Now you're in the jail system. If you get released again and you don't have anywhere to go, you still go back out to the street because you were homeless to start with. Nothing changed. You went to jail and you got 3 cots and a cot. Now you're homeless again and you've been picked up again. You're in jail again. And then you end up getting caught enough times. Let's say you're in a three strike state and you get arrested that many times. Then you get to stay in jail and you get to start working for the prison industrial complex. You are now a free laborer, or a very, 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 very cheap laborer for a for-profit private prison corporation. It's pretty easy to figure out, my guys. It's pretty easy to figure out, my friends. All you have to do is look at how they're treating people at Delaney. And all of this, again, comes back to the intersectionality of how all of this is emotional, depressing, stressful, traumatic. It's not good, but it has to be discussed. And then, yes, we do need the balance, getting out in nature, going swimming, river, fishing, lake, hike, whatever that makes you happy. But again, if you live in a little rural place or whatever, you might not have the access to that. So you have to find other ways to make yourself happy and find reasons to smile. And I promise you, you don't need some man telling you should smile more and you're too emotional. It's the last thing any woman wants. Anyways, I leave you with that on the note that if anyone tells you that you're too much, just remember, it's not that you're too much. It's that they don't have the capacity for the depth of you. Until next time, this has been another episode of The Mind of Cy Marie. Remember, the mind is the most important story that we'll ever tell.